Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. We got a great presentation this morning as part of our Earth Month series. So as you all know, the Earth Month series is kind of dedicated to obviously around Earth Day this year. And we have a whole series last week, obviously spoke a lot about kind of solar and solar energy around El Dorado and some of the opportunities and challenges around that project. And then today we're going to be talking a lot about climate, which is great and is the front page of the Santa Fe New Mexican today. Many of you may have seen that, kind of talking about the Caja del Rio cleanup we did yesterday for Earth Day. We picked up 13,500 pounds of trash off the Caja yesterday. Filled two commercial dumpsters. So had about 120 volunteers come out as part of our work. So yeah, it's unfortunate that it needs to be done. But you know, we obviously grateful that we have many laborers in the vineyard right now to do this work. And of course, one of those laborers is Michael Stewart. So you know, we are honored to have him this morning. I want to let him give a little bit more of his background and introduction. But he's worked, you know, with over years over not environmental organizations, nonprofits for years. Done some really great work, and has obviously got some innovative ideas around climate. And as I mentioned to him, obviously this will be recorded. One other announcement I want to give around Earth Day, or actually two. The first is we have compost bags available to anybody who would like to pick them up right here on the table. You can take them home, fill up your food scraps this week, and if you want, bring them back. And we have free composting down in the basement, and the bins are right down there. So that's free and available to any members. I highly recommend it. Composting is a huge way that you can reduce kind of methane and other kind of, you know, problematic atmospheric gases that are just going into landfills. Also, composted soil is incredibly water retentive. So that in an area that's, you know, highly dry like ours, when you use composted soil, you actually have soil that can hold water a lot better and reduces the amount of water that we end up using. So highly recommend anyone who's not composting to start doing it. Just give it a try. You can pick up the bags right out here, a roll of 3 bags, and you can bring those bags filled anytime you want down to the church and put them in the bins in the basement. So we want to offer that to all our members.
I didn't know you had a composting program.
Yeah.
Here?
Yep, we started it here. Yeah, it's been a labor of love with my wife and I. We got going for the last year, and we've got our preschool on board, which is a lot of kids, 100 kids. And so making sure all those food scraps, which, as you know, kids and eating are always interesting. And so there's a lot of food and stuff like that, and just wanted to reduce a lot of that waste.
Some interesting things flow coming into your.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So we end up collecting all that, and then of course we provide composting to our members for any of our events, and we've got bins around the church. So yeah. So Alice.
Is it anything except plastic and non-ionic that you use instead?
It's largely food scraps is going to be your best thing. So your orange pills, banana pills, you know, strawberry ends, whatever, meat, you know, stuff like that, chicken bones, all of that stuff is readily compostable. Not newspaper. You know, generally you have to have compostable paper. That's paper that's been processed in such a way that's compostable, like compostable cups, compostable plates, right? That's the coffee grounds. Yeah, coffee grounds, coffee filters, right? Those are great. So all that stuff can go in your compost bin. And the good thing is you can also go by Renewity Resources, which is who we compost through, and then they'll, you know, even give you soil for your gardens. So.
Well, also there's a website, and you go to their compost program, there's a whole list of what they will accept, what they won't.
That's right.
Accept. And it is unusual because they accept some meat products, which in a previous life, we couldn't use that.
Yep.
But they're very clear about what they will take. And one more thing, if you go to Trader Joe's, their bags are compostable. If you go to Whole Foods, theirs are not, but they look similar. So be careful if you put in your compost.
Yeah, and you got free compostable bags out there, so just use those. That's the easiest way to do it.
But you need to have a body.
Yeah. So what they just specifically say, no carcasses. So yes, chicken bones and stuff like that, but then you start putting in a whole deer, probably a problem. So yeah, I highly recommend not doing that. So anyway, we get a little off topic here. And then next week I'll be presenting here as kind of as the final part of this series, talking about our energy audit, kind of updating what we've been doing as a church. and really catching you all up to speed on, are there ways that we can work together individually and collectively to try to make a difference on some of these bigger issues, right? So I'll kind of be covering all that next week. But with that said, I want to hand things over to Michael. He's a good friend of some of the members in this church, and gratefully came to us kind of with a desire to present on climate change, which is such a pressing issue, as you all know. And so really want to hand things over to Michael, who's got a fascinating background. I'll let him talk a little bit more about that. But I want to thank you for being here and, of course, for your advocacy. I mean, our world needs it. Our kids need it. We all need it. So we're incredibly grateful for your life work.
Just learning about stuff. I'm surprised. I'm frequently surprised by what all you're working on that ties in. So it's very cool.
Cool. Let me hand things over, and you can stand kind of in front of the computer. It should be at the right level. Yeah, you're looking good.
Oh, well. Thank you.
Whenever you want to. You want to share the screen?
Sure.
So your presentation's up.
Make sure we do that. And which one is it? This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'll have to make it bigger.
Yeah, presentation mode.
Yep.
Right there, right. Yep,
Thank you.
you got it.
Cool.
No problem.
Nice job. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So, good morning. I'm Michael Stewart, and I'm delighted to be here this morning. And mostly what I want to talk about today is there's so much good news about addressing climate change that it can be quite surprising. And that's mostly what I'm going to get into today. And so we have already all the solutions and all the technologies that we need to stop climate change. That's not the challenge. The challenge is our will, our political will. And, I often think about what will propel us, the light that will propel us to a surprising success in addressing climate change is love. Love of God's creation. And so when I was about 5 or 6 years old, is when I first, fell totally in love with life, with the creation. Growing up in the desert outside of Tucson, I'd see a mama javelina trotting by with 4 of her kids running behind her. And I was just like, or I'd watch a cactus wren. Y'all know what a teddy bear cholla is? Like they're the most like frightening looking cholla cactus you can imagine. Stronger spines than we see around here, razor sharp, and they're very thick with branches. And you watch, when I was very, very young, I watched a cactus wren fly right into a teddy bear cholla. And I thought, why would you kill yourself? Well, I don't get it. And I went up very timidly and was sitting on its nest in the middle of this astonishing cactus, right? And I'm like, yeah, well, nobody's going to mess with you when you're in there. Right? It's like, anyway, I think we all have that, right? We all have many places in our lives where the creation itself touches us and we feel the love in our hearts for God's creation, right? You all do. So that's where I got going. Unfortunately, for me, no, I'm sort of joking, but I've spent most of my adult life doing environmental campaigns. And so they're very fulfilling. I don't recommend it for young people who want to make money. Not really a great way to go. So certainly right now, we're kind of in a deep hole in terms of climate change. We've got a long way to go to turn things around, but it is happening. There's a lot happening, a lot of good news. So fast forward 20 or so years after I fell in love with the Southern Arizona desert, and I tried 3 different times to go to university, different universities. It's what you do. It's what you go to school. it never rang for me. I didn't get it going. But when I was 17, my older brother gave me a surprise Christmas gift of my first skydive. And I got, I just loved being in airplane. I'd been an airline passenger. And then for years, I would go up in small planes, but had never landed in one because you jump out. And when I was in my mid-20s in Tucson, I'm looking through the newspaper, and here's a coupon for a $10 introductory flight lesson. I said, even I can come up with $10. So I went out to the airport. I took my flight lesson, small airplane. I was hooked. I was like, okay, I don't care what it takes. I got to learn how to fly. So I asked around, and I was working as a waiter at a not a very expensive restaurant, so not making much money. I didn't have any money. So I asked around. I said, where can I make some money? And several different people said, well, the mine north of town, there's an underground mine and magma copper. So I went out to the mine. I got a job, and they put me to work 2,000 feet underground. Okay, so you ride an elevator down to where you're working. They trained me for all of a day, which is overkill. But, so I went to work with the lead guys called the chute blaster, and I'm the chute tapper. And he's bigger than me, got a black beard. He's a miner. So he is to me. So at lunchtime, we would go out into a safe room and they'd set up our explosives. So after about a week of working with David, we're in the safe room having lunch. And he turns to me and he says, so why are you working in this mine? I said, oh, because I want to earn the money to learn how to fly. And he breaks out laughing. Like I've said, the funniest thing in the world. Of course, I think he's laughing at me. Like, come on, you never learn how to fly. He goes, I'm a flight instructor. So the guy who taught me how to fly airplanes, I met him 2,000 feet underground. So back in the 1970s, it was actually oil company scientists, you guys probably know this, who figured out that the byproducts of oil extraction and use were going to lead to catastrophic climate change. There were oil company scientists who first brought it up. Well, that was right at the end of the 1970s. And in the early 1980s, Exxon and Mobil and British Petroleum got together, the major oil companies got together, and they formed the IPI-ECA, the International Petroleum Industries Environmental Conservation Association. So they formed International Petroleum Industries Environmental Conservation Association. And they used their association to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to deny climate science and oppose regulations. So they've been at that since the early 1980s. So we've lost a lot of time in trying to address climate change. To the primary driver, as you all know, is petroleum industry. And yeah, so they got right on it. They took care of it right away. And I've often thought, well, maybe, what do you think? Maybe the oil companies were just wanting to inject some humor into the thing. We'll do this Environmental Conservation Association and use it to block all environmental stuff. I want to share, you probably have run into the name Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, some of you. Widely regarded, he was a Jesuit priest, a scholar, and widely regarded as the most widely revered theologian of the last century, the 20th century. Remarkable man. And not too long ago, I ran into a quote from Teilhard de Chardin, and it just hit me so powerfully, right? By means of all created things, without exception, the divine assails us, penetrates us, and molds us. We imagine that the divine is distant and inaccessible, when in fact, we live steeped in its burning layers. Anyway, that to me, that's like living on this planet. It's like the divine is around us all the time, right? So anyway, I wanted to share that with you because I just love it. So finally, I'm going to get into, I guess I should mention just a little bit because I want to, so I finally learned how to fly. I got a commercial pilot's license, and I did a lot of different kinds of flying work. And I had a vision for an environmental organization, a campaign organization that would use traditional methods like lobbying on Capitol Hill, doing community organizing, working with the media to get coverage, solutions for environmental protection, combined with flight. Okay. And yep, I've spent a lifetime with people going, huh? So I know. But in a nutshell, let's say that, George, you're a member of the U.S. Senate. Did you know that we just appointed you to the Senate? I'm very good man. We're counting on you. Okay, do some good stuff. So you're a member of the U.S. Senate, and we come to you and we say, Senator, you really, really should come and see what's going on with the public for the national forests, the Pacific Northwest. They're being clear-cut, logged, and decimated. And if you'll come with us, we'll take you on a driving tour. We'll take you over there, show you around, take a day, spend the night, come back the next day. And you're going to say, what? You want to take 2 days of my time? Not a chance. If we say to you, we'll pick you up to the airport of your choice in a turbine-powered aircraft, take you over there, you'll see what's really happening. We'll have you back in time for lunch. All of a sudden, you're able to say, okay, so I had this vision for this, and I didn't have any money. I didn't know people who had money. And so I spent for 4 years, I had a job in Northwest Alaska as a bush pilot. This is all the way back when there was such a thing as bush pilots. And now with GPS and stuff, it's kind of gone by the way, at least in this country. Anyhow, I'd go back to Northwest Alaska and work for 8 months or so. And I'd come back to the lower 48 and spend my time like this. Hi, you have money, I was told. Wouldn't you like to back this organization? And I failed and failed and failed. And finally, I met a guy. I didn't know he had money. And so he and I did, Ashley Carruthers in Colorado. And he and I did some hikes together. We became friends, just starting to be friends. And one day he calls me, and I just would tell him, and I named my vision, had a name for it, LightHawk. And one day he calls me up and he says, so tell me a little more detail about your idea about working for the environment. So we talked for about half an hour. And I'd never had anybody kind of grill me the way he did. Of course, I loved it. He was interested for whatever reason. Finally, he says, well, look, I own 5 airplanes, and I can loan you one. Try and start your organization. Okay? And I'll give you $5,000 for fuel and stuff. Sorry, I didn't sleep that much last night. Anyhow, sweet memories. With that, I got to start. And right away, I was able to do some work that made a difference. We exposed some illegal logging in the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness in Montana. We exposed the massive stupidity of a plan to put a dam on the Gunnison River, western Colorado. And so we were able to, in 6 months' time, he loaned me the aircraft for 6 months. And in that time, I was able to get enough done that I was able to start to say, well, see, this kind of works. And 2 weeks before I had to return his aircraft, a Wyoming ranch family said, okay, we're going to give you their first airplane. Can you stop this? Sorry, guys. So that was a start. I did that work for 20 years. And the reason this slide is up, it's all right, come back to that, is because we were able to do enough work that scored big successes for the environment that I got written up in all these publications and others. We did a campaign that permanently cleaned up what had been for 75 years the largest single source of acid rain and arsenic air pollution in the entire United States. And it was kind of fun because when we first went to work on that part, it was a copper smelter in southern Arizona. And no one had ever done air sampling. You know, two 600 foot tall smokestacks were putting out this dense cloud of poison. And we did the air sampling and took our results to members of Congress. And they figuratively patted me on the head and said, yeah, you need to get NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research. If they tell us it's putting out this much stuff, we'll believe it. Not so much from you. So we took what we had found to NCAR, and they almost laughed at me. Their scientist said, Michael, look, it would take the industrial output of the state of Pennsylvania to put out that much sulfur dioxide, which of course combines with water vapor in the air and makes the most acidic acid rain, that much arsenic. Take massive amounts of industrial output. So I said, okay, how about I'll bring your scientists? You guys can check it out. And the second time we did this in the airplane, we took breathing apparatus because first time we did it, the three of us in the airplane got sick from the stuff in the air. So we had said, our scientists, University of New Mexico, had said, it's about 1,000 tons sulfur dioxide every day going out to stacks. So we told that for the scientists at NCAR, and they said, no way. Okay, so we finally took a long time. We finally got their scientists to come, and they did their own air sampling. I flew them back to Boulder, where they're based, and I said, okay, well, how long are you guys going to need to have results? And they said, oh, give us a week. Great. In 2 weeks, I contacted them. Well, no, we're not ready. 2 more weeks. 6 weeks. It took them to finally say to me, their numbers were higher than ours. So then we had the scientific grounding that we could start to really go to the media. We got the LA Times, we got NBC Nightly News to cover it, right? And finally we got by the way, so that smelter was operating under a waiver of exemption from the Clean Air Act that had been scored for them by a guy named Barry Goldwater. Remember Barry Goldwater? Okay. So he scored for them a waiver of exemption. So we were able, over a period of about 4 years, we built a movement and we built enough media coverage that the pressure on the government was strong enough that the EPA finally said, we're going to have to rescind your waiver of exemption. You're going to have to clean it up. No way to do that. So they permanently shut it down. Anyway, we had lots of other successes in Latin America and in here in this country and stuff. So we got written up in a lot of press, and that's fine. I'm coming to that. No, that's fine. I'll get there in just a half second. But I did that work for 20 years, and I was good at some things. I was really good at some things, and I was terrible at other things. Chiefly on that list, I would say hiring competent people to work in our organization. That led to me just working all the time. Now I was on fire and thrilled. I mean, I would wake up every day and just feel like, fantastic, I get to do this work. But I was working all the time and loving it, but not getting any exercise. Working. Lots of pressure. I got to raise lots of money. We got 3 airplanes now. I got 14 full-time employees. A lot to do. I'm not exercising much. Now I'm not sleeping. Too much combination of pressure and work and stuff, not exercising. So biggest mistake of my life, at least one of the top 2, and I'm in my 70s. So biggest mistake of my life, I went to a medical doctor. I said, Doc, I'm not sleeping. No problem. Here, take this drug. It's called Halcyon. You'll sleep. Okay, thanks. Now, he didn't tell me 2 kind of critical things. He didn't tell me, if you take this drug for a couple of nights, it creates what's called a rebound effect. Now, on the 4th night, 5th night, the rest of the nights, if you don't take it, that night you will not sleep. No way. So for about a year, I would take the pill and break. I said, I'm not going to take it tonight. No way. Not going to take it. Go to bed at 10 o'clock. Can't sleep at all. Get up. Not midnight. Not going to take it. 2 in the morning. I got to fly as senator in the morning. I got to sleep. Take a little of this drug. Sleep a little bit. The other thing he didn't tell me is while you're taking it, you cannot get to the deepest levels of sleep. So I'm taking a drug to help me sleep that is destroying my sleep. That drug evolved into a current popular sleep medication called Ambien. But when it was in the form that I was taking it before, called Halcyon, it was even worse quite a bit than Ambien. So I'm not sleeping well. I've got huge pressures on me, and I broke down. And I walked away. We owned airplanes those 3 airplanes today would be worth combined over $4 million. I had created that for the nonprofit. We had successes from Alaska to Central America and South America. We did some work in Chile. All gone. So I then proceeded to spend the better part of 20 years. I had 20 years of just being like that. And I spent almost 20 years really depressed because I had failed to keep this whole thing going, right? I'd really broken down. At last, I'm going to get to the good news. I appreciate your patience. I have a coach that I have a lot of faith in who advised me to give you a little bit of my own story. Maybe I gave a little too much, but thanks for bearing with me. So all aviation combined puts out about 3% of human-caused greenhouse gases. Okay? But there's great good news on that front. More and more, they're developing sustainable aviation fuels. They're not sourced from petroleum. They don't come from petroleum. They come from plant oils and algae and captured CO2 and grease and fats and a long list of feedstocks, and they've been making sustainable aviation fuel. Now, this is not distant future. This is, Boeing has flown their 7 777, their 777, on 100% SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. Both KLM and Lufthansa have been flying regularly scheduled passenger flights on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. NASA predicts that by 2050, emissions from all aviation will decline by 85%. So we often think about airliners and airplanes as putting out a lot of greenhouse gases. About 3% right now, going down. Oh, Delta Airlines has committed to being net zero carbon by 2050. Delta Airlines made a very public commitment. I want to be at cows. How do we get? Great, thank you.
Sorry, the trigger is a little.
It's a little sensitive. It's matching me today. Every time I cry, it goes through. So these guys put out more than 3 times as much of a percentage of human-caused greenhouse gases as all of aviation. And of course, as you guys all know, they put out predominantly methane. And methane is approximately 80 times more potent at trapping heat in our atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So methane is really a top target when we're trying to address climate change. Some years ago, University of Tasmania, in combination with University of California, Davis, discovered that they could feed Asparagopsis taxiformis. You guys all know Asparagopsis taxiformis. It's a red seaweed, and you can take that seaweed and dry it, grind it up. 3.5 ounces of that red seaweed dried in a cow's feed per day reduces the methane they put out by 80%. So these guys are one of the biggest contributors to climate change. And there are 3 companies right now already that I know about. There's Volta Green Tech in Sweden. There's Sea Forest in Australia, where the whole thing started, and Blue Ocean Barns in Hawaii on the Big Island, that are producing, that are growing, developing ways to grow this seaweed. And Blue Ocean Barns in Hawaii has a goal by 2050 to produce enough of that seaweed to put it in the feed of all cows in the United States. Okay, this would be huge, huge in addressing moving climate change in the right direction. Perfect. Thank you. Deforestation, so clearing trees, accounts for about 23% of all human-caused greenhouse gases. Now we're getting into the big granddaddies of causing climate change. And in Switzerland, ETH, which is an interesting project, they did a project led by a guy with the delightful name of Jean-Francois Baston. And they studied the globe, and they found out that there are about 2.2 billion acres of lands that could be reforested. We could get forests going again. Well, reforestation holds huge promise because growing trees sequester carbon, right? That's a great way to take carbon out of the atmosphere. And it would take about 500 billion trees to do that on that much acreage. That's a big project, but scientists figure that that would reduce greenhouse gases by about 25%. Now those are interesting numbers. That's not a goal that can reasonably be reached. But my point is that reforestation is a very powerful tool that we have to address climate change. So the more we can promote things like, hey, reforestation, can really help. Just in the last 2 years, 14 donor countries, most of them Europe and Japan, have committed to put up $12 billion towards reforestation efforts. And they've been matched by about $7 billion from private entities, mostly European corporations. That's very hopeful. There's a project in Central Africa that includes 12 different countries, the African Forest Landscape Restoration Project. Now, and this will shock you, but they've been planting trees. Their goal is to reforest 100 million acres. They've already done about 150,000 acres. It's a lot of tree planting. And it's mostly been carried out by roughly 5,000 women. Those pesky women, they're always doing stuff like that.
Or the original tree.
Yes, that's it. That's it. So one of the biggest opportunities of all for addressing climate change is regenerative agriculture. So there are many different agricultural practices that if you do them using cover crops, putting a mix of crops in. Let's go to another slide. So reforestation is massive. One more. Great, thank you. So the Rodale Institute, this is another number that sort of doesn't connect to anything we can do right away, but there's so much capability to store carbon in the soil where it feeds plants, right? It's not only great for addressing climate change, you get healthier plants. So you do things like grow a mix of crops instead of a monoculture. You don't grow just, wheat. You grow wheat with legumes, with, lots of different things. And you put animals in the same area instead of the animals are over there and the wheat's over here. No. Think the way nature thinks, right? So the promise of storing CO2 in the soil, so you get healthier plants, you get healthier animals that eat those plants, like us. So it's a wonderful win-win. There's one of the most famous guys, because people wrote a book about him and had him pitch a lot on this, a guy named Gabe Mitchell, and in North Dakota, Gabe Brown. And Gabe likes to say he inherited a farm in North Dakota, losing money. He's losing money. He's trying to figure out, how can I keep going? And he started to just scratch into regenerative agriculture. And all of a sudden, he's breaking even. So for one thing, he's moved from high chemical use to organic. So he can charge more money for his product because people pay a little more for organic produce. He just kept going, and now he's highly successful financially. And one of the things I love about Gabe, he says, I really like signing the backs of checks instead of the front. And he's doing it. Let's go to car. Cool. Estimates are now that electric vehicles are going to come on gangbusters, as they already are. And by 3 years from now, 2027, estimates are there'll be 155 million electric vehicles on the road globally. That'll keep about 3 million barrels of oil in the ground every day. So there's a lot there. Okay, let's go to, there's also direct capture.
Yes. Notice it's number for sure, but I believe 1 gallon of gas puts 50 pounds or something instead of doing it. These numbers are hard.
Yeah, that, it could be 1 gallon, could be as much as like 10 pounds, I would say. I don't think, but it's a lot. It's a lot. Well, and while we're on that subject, I mean, the great bulk of climate warming gases. Now, what have we got? Another 15 minutes? Is that about right?
Anyway, I got Nissan Leaf. That's car.
Ah, that's great. Way to go. Cool.
Cost almost nothing. Sorry for that.
Charge it up. That's great. That's great. Yeah. So again, there's a lot of good news on the front of, it's just in the last month that the journal Nature published, Evan Goodwin's, he was the lead researcher, over a period of about 2 years, and over 1 million sampling sites of the petroleum industry. They found that roughly under 2% of all oil wells put out between 50 and 60% of all the methane that's leaked by the oil industry. That's a big target. So that's something that you can really aim at, right? Detect that, stop it. So that's great news. I'm going to have to blaze through this. Climeworks is, this company has developed direct capture. So they're taking carbon right out of the air. They take a metal mesh that's coated with amines. It's called adsorption, not absorption, adsorption. And it captures the carbon. Then you can take that mesh and heat it. Only need to take it up to about 100 degrees centigrade. It will release the carbon, and you can capture the carbon for other uses. So this is another strategy for addressing climate change. And I'll skip that because I want to save time. My number one thing I want to share with you today is that we are contagious. By that, I'm talking about our attitude. Okay. People pick up from us without us even saying a word, our attitude about anything. If you carry an attitude that climate change is going to destroy us, that's what people pick up from you. Okay. So one of the most powerful tools we've got is attitude. Have an attitude. We are going to stop climate change, and we are, but it's going to take everybody doing as much as they can. So Kelly's handing out cards that I love using. When you go someplace and you park your car and you get out, and there's somebody parked right next to you, maybe on their cell phone with their motor running. They're parked. They don't need their motor running, right? So I give these cards out. More and more people are giving these cards out. I always do it with a big smile. Hey, how are you doing? Hey, may I give you this? And they'll look at it and go, and I get the whole gamut of responses, right? Sometimes people go and ignore me. Most often they'll at least turn off their motor sort of right away. And maybe 20% of the time, people will actually say to me, oh, turn off their motor and say, thank you for doing this. So it's easy. It's way easy to fall into despair. The sky is falling. And despair is paralyzing. We can't despair because we're going to lose if we go into despair. So faith, you're here in this house of faith. Faith and action are the cures for despair. So there are all kinds of things we can do to turn things around. Just one last image I want to share. I got to have a little taste of water. Let's say we're let's say we're hiking, beautiful summertime day, we're deep in the Canadian Rockies, no towns around for 100 miles. And we come on cave, and the cave is huge, and we walk in, and we come on a tool. It looks like it's some alien tool, it's this beautiful crafted thing. And we figure out that this tool, if we just pick it up and use it, will stop climate change. That tool exists. That tool is our voices, our communication. Climate change is easily the biggest threat to ever face humanity. No question. It's a huge, huge challenge. But we're built to overcome big challenges. That's what human beings is all about, right? And it brings so much satisfaction for us to take part in something that's very challenging and to win. Overcoming big challenges is the birthright of humanity. And it's the source of our proudest moments. It's time to make ourselves proud. We got a couple of minutes for questions just in case.
I randomly heard an NPR interview a few days ago on radio, and it was a British woman. I didn't hear all the interview. And she said exactly what you said. I'm like, this is a coordinated message. When you said we're optimistic and we already have all the tools to solve this. Just said exactly. I'm like, this is a coordinated.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and she just started kind of international, spoke with a British woman with a British accent. I'm like, that must be like sharing a message.
She must have hacked into my computer, and I'm gonna have to track her down and say, quit putting out this message of hope.
Exactly.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, power things down. Oh, actually, I should, because they're coming to me. Yeah, right on.
I just have a question about, I guess it's a seaweed that can go into.
Cattle feed?
Cattle feed. I'm sure there has been research that's done having that additive, does that make the feed more expensive?
Well,
I mean, how does it hit them? Because if you know anybody that's a rancher, I mean, any business, it's all about the money you're making. So can that offset, or how does it offset?
That's a perfectly great question. And a long time ago, I did a bunch of work with cattle ranchers and cattle producers. And so I can really relate. And so, first of all, somebody has to pay for the seaweed. You're absolutely right. But it results in one of the things that happens with the cows' methane emissions come mostly in the form of burps. About 80% of the methane they produce comes out this way. The other 20% goes out that way. But the loss, that's energy. And what happens is when they start using the seaweed, you get healthier cows. And so it pays off on that end, okay? And so there are all kinds of programs that people are proposing to get subsidies to help pay for the seaweed, but it does have that benefit. So I think that probably my guess is this is just, I'm just making this up, but my guess is that as production ramps up, demand for the seaweed will ramp up right with it. And they'll start to, but that is one of the top targets when we're talking about addressing climate change. That's a great question.
What is the name of the company that is producing it?
There are three companies that I know about. The US-based company is called Blue Ocean Barns. Like we got the cows in the barn, Blue Ocean Barns. They're on the Big Island in Hawaii. And you can see their facility. It's right, it's between the airport on the, oh, come on, it'll come to me. On the on the west side. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got it backwards. What's the other side of the town? Kona, the Kona airport, between the Kona airport and Kailua Kona, the town is where they're located. But there's also a company in Sweden that's doing it called Green Voltec, and there's a company in Australia where the whole thing started called Sea Forest, like SEA, Sea Forest. Oh, I didn't even mention, the more we produce, growing seaweed also sequesters carbon out of the atmosphere. So it's a real win-win situation. So can you bring up our handout? You already handed them out. Good job. Oh, wait, hey, you guys, you gotta come with me, please. Please, come over here.